So the king was sacrificed in order to ensure the fertility of the land. This connection between the king and the land carries on in many traditions, not only in Greek, where we see Oedipus, but we'll talk about Oedipus later. And also Arthur is intimately connected with the land. And when Arthur suffers, the land suffers. But we're going to talk about that in later Greek myth. But this king was sacrificed every 7 years in order to, ensure fertility. Well, that was fine in the matriarchy, and it was always the same queen. I mean, she died a natural death. This is also where you get the image of the older woman and the younger man. Cybele is married to Attis. Attis is much younger. Aphrodite is older than Adonis. Graves even says that the myth of Oedipus, wherein he marries his mother Jocasta, that was really kind of messed around with later mythographers, and that it wasn't really his mother he married. It was just the older queen, and he would have been the younger king coming in. So who knows? That would surely, blow up Freud's theory about, boys wanting to marry their mothers. But at any rate, within this matriarchal system, Graves says this is what you have. Now, you have a patriarchy come in, and the patriarchy establishes itself. And suddenly, and of course it wasn't suddenly, but the king became as important as the queen, and eventually would become more important. So the king said, hey, you know something? I don't want to die in 7 years. Hey, let's get Joe. Joe's not as important as I am. Let's sacrifice Joe. He can be my stand-in. So they sacrificed Joe for a while. And then Joe says, whoa, wait a minute. I'm a man. I'm important. I'm human. Why should I have to die? Let's kill a bull. Let's kill a lamb. Let's kill a dove. So the idea of sacrifices changes. And you have animals start standing in the stead of humans. There are many scholars who say that all cultures, all ancient cultures, practice human sacrifice. And I think there's a lot of evidence in that. And I'll talk about that later with Agamemnon and Clytemnestra and Iphigenia, their poor daughter, and what happened at Troy. So you had this, then they had the institution of the sacrifice of the animals. And it was the king who died originally because the king was the best. It wouldn't have been, a weak man who would have become king. As in later, when you sacrificed, you didn't sacrifice your sick animals. You didn't sacrifice your runty animals. You sacrificed those that were perfect and unblemished. Because if you don't sacrifice the perfect, you're not really sacrificing, are you? Yeah. So the patriarchy instituted itself within Pelasgia, and of course this thing continued well on into the classical era, because women really did become second-class citizens, and you see this in within the pantheon of the Greeks as well. Now back to historical allegory. I talked about how Theseus going over to the mainland and breaking that tie. And I did forget to mention that. I'll throw it in here. I know, but it's better than going back and doing the other video. The tribute stopped in the myth of Theseus. They didn't send any more youngsters over to Crete to be sacrificed to the Minotaur anymore, which again, no tribute, no taxes. Greece becomes independent. I'm sorry about that, but I did want to mention that. But back to Pelasgia. Historical allegory. This war between the Pelasgians and the Aryans becomes, of course, the war between the Titans, the Pelasgians, and the Olympians, the Aryans. And you had successive waves of Aryans come into Greece. The Dorians were Aryan, the Achaeans were Aryan, the Ionians were Aryan. The civilization of Mycenae, which were Achaeans, they were Aryans. And so you have this war between the Pelasgians and the Aryans. I said that 3 times now, I'm sorry. Being a historical allegory for the war between the Titans and the Olympians. And of course the Olympians win. And when the Olympians won, the Titans were put out of business. The Titan goddesses, however, most of them made the transition from being Titans into Olympians. Hera, Aphrodite, Artemis, and Demeter. Now, Athena was, she wasn't probably not Pelasgian. She might have been, but she has deeper roots, and you were supposed to read the myth of Athena. She even, it comes as far away as Libya. But these goddesses made the transition from the Titans into the Olympians, which showed the importance of these old myths and how they hung on. However, they changed. Hera goes from being, a strong goddess in her own right to being the wife of Zeus and being quite subservient. Artemis was the patroness of childbirth, yet within Greek myth, she becomes a virgin in the modern sense of the word, and that she never has a husband and she never has sexual relationships. How do you become a goddess of childbirth? Well, it was supposedly because her mother felt no pains when she gave birth to her, and then Artemis helped her brother Apollo be born. Who knows? Aphrodite really changes because she, like Inanna, evolved into Ishtar and become a more petty goddess. Kind of the same thing happens to Aphrodite. And Demeter as well loses her status. Now, of course, you read about other aspects of how these goddesses came about. For example, Aphrodite. The most common myth of Aphrodite is that she is, when Kronos cuts off Uranus's genitals, that, his semen falls into the sea and fertilizes, and that's where Aphrodite comes from. So this marriage of Hera and Zeus is historical allegory from a marriage between the Pelasgians and the Aryans, but it really isn't an equal marriage. It's a subjugation of one culture by another culture. So whenever you read these types of things, bear in mind historical allegory and what the real story is behind that.